Well, hey folks, Jason here. We are first week of April, 2020. So right now it's the COVID-19, and everyone is supposed to be physically distancing and quarantining and things like that. And workload is low and highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression. And people are nervous and people are scared. And I wanted to talk to you about how God provides. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 6, which is also part of the Sermon on the Mount. You know, he says the Gentiles run after all these things, which is food and money and clothing. And he says, look at the lilies of the field. Even Solomon in all his splendor was not even clothed as well as these things. And look at the sparrows. And God cares way more for you than a sparrow, and God takes care of the sparrows. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all of this stuff will be added onto you. Does it mean a health and wealth gospel? No, it means that God's going to take care of you. And I thought I'd share with you a few examples of my life. And you know what? God has never provided the same way twice. Just never has. But he provides. The first is I was still single, and I was a student in seminary, first year in seminary, and I was driving a school bus to make ends meet. And I could provide from my school bus income. I could provide enough to live on, but not enough for not enough to pay my tuition. And I remember going into this field outside the seminary and yelling and screaming at God, very angry, and saying, "You called me here. Where's the money?" And I don't know if it was God speaking or a thought in my head, but it came into my head and said, "Go work at McDonald's." And my pride level was up over here. And at that time, I grew up in construction, worked for my father. I said, "God, I'm a carpenter, a finishing carpenter. I don't work at McDonald's." So I went and put out about 30 or 40 resumes. McDonald's was one of them. And guess who was the only company that called me for an interview? McDonald's. And so I started working at McDonald's. And within 2 weeks, kids started coming to know Jesus. They were asking me about Jesus. And the vice president of the seminary used to joke to me and say, "Oh, there goes Jason going down to the Mick church." But I still had to work. And I drove school bus. And I worked at McDonald's. And I paid my tuition cash that year. Another story on how God provides. I met my wife online. We saw each other 3 times before we got married. We've been married, it'll be 18 years this year in May. So next month will be 18 years. And we were at the seminary in Cochrane, Alberta. And she's from Texas. And our first year of marriage, we got married in May, and by September, she was pregnant with our firstborn. And God was making it very obvious that we needed to move back to Houston, Texas. And when we made that decision to go, it was a faith move, a total faith move. So much so that she was 3 months pregnant with our son, and we moved down at Christmas time. And I had $27 to my name. And we lived with her parents. And within the first week of living down there, the neighbors who are not Christians, his mother passed away, and in Florida, willed them a car. And they said, we have no use for this car. Here, it's yours. Wow. I was able to do some odd jobs, got to preach a lot. And 2 days before my son was born, guess what? I was able to get my work visa because I'm Canadian. She's American. You still need a work visa even though you marry someone. That was kind of cool. Later on, I got hired on at Security First Baptist Church as the youth and children's pastor. I was the only full-time pastor out of 4. And God provided, and they gave us the parsonage to live in. And something really cool happened. The 2 years I was there, I was able to baptize 53 people in 2 years. Really cool. And then God was calling us back up to a place called Medicine Hat, Alberta. But we didn't have the money to move, and we were to plant a church. I said, God, if you're calling us, we'll go, but you need to provide the funds. And I gave my notice at the church. We didn't have the money to move. And a week before we moved, the church cut us a check that covered all of our moving expenses. Didn't ask for it from them, but God provided. Part of the deal with our convention was that I would go back to seminary and just do a semester there just to, get reassociated with the Canadian culture. And so I have 2 special needs children, and my wife couldn't work because of these 2 special needs children. And I was going to school full time, and I still had to provide for my family. And so I worked nights, 40 hours a week nights, stocking shelves at Safeway. I was a zombie. And Christmas was coming. And we had $100 for Christmas. Just $100. Someone found out about that. And they gave my kids so many presents that my oldest boy spent a week unwrapping presents. I'm not kidding you. It was mind-boggling to us how God provided. And how God provides and provides and provides. And he always does it in a different way. But he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And the reason why he does it in a different way is so you don't have a formula, right? This is all for you to get to know God deeper, trust God more. So when these things like COVID-19 pop up, you're like, okay, we've been through this before, and it's not the universe or anything like that. It's just that you get to know God so much deeper and so much more intimately that no matter what happens, God's going to take care of you. Do you still have to work? As much as you can. But God will take care of you. First thing you need to remember is seek first his kingdom. What does that look like? Well, that means making him your king. Be one of his servants. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. What does that mean? You have zero righteousness of your own. And in order to be in the presence of God, you need to have 100% righteousness. And the only way you're going to get 100% righteousness is if God gives it to you. It is a grace gift. And the only way you can get that is by repenting, which means changing your mind and focusing on what God wants you to do instead of what you want to do, and put your faith into him, into what he's done on the cross. Seek him daily in prayer and Bible study. The more you get to know him, the sweeter it becomes. And when huge pandemics and crises like COVID-19 come around, you're like, okay. God's going to provide for us. I'm not going to be overly anxious. I don't like the ride myself, but God will take care of me. How do I know? Experience. You see, His truth will always be truth. But to take his truth from here to here, you need experience. And as he walks you through that, he knows what's coming up. And so now, if you're wondering how is God going to provide for you during this time, just do this. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. It may not be the ride that you want, but God will drive you closer to him, and your relationship with him will become much more sweeter. Anyway, guys, have yourselves a great day. We'll talk to you soon.